Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our live event tonight. I'm seeing people joining in and probably more will come in as we start. I'm Seow. I'm a co-host of the Waiting Room Revolution.
And I'm Samantha Winemaker. I'm a palliative care physician and also a co-host of the Waiting Room Revolution.
And tonight we're really excited to host a live event with a palliative care physician from Stanford and an AYA cancer patient. But before we start, so just a couple housekeeping things. Everyone is muted and your cameras are off. It is a live event and it's being recorded. We use the recordings for a future podcast, but you're watching it live. If you have any technical issues, you can use the chat and message Kayla or the moderator. She's the moderator and she can try to help you through. If you have questions that come up, you can also type them in the chat. We'll see how the discussion goes. I think we're slated till 9:15 Eastern Standard Time, which is 6:15 Pacific Time, but we can just see how it goes and we go over a little bit. That would be great. So before we start the official interview, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our podcast. It was sort of we started this year, Sammy and I, it started from discussions that we desired to sort of empower patients and families with information that we knew. I'm just going to pull up a slide really quick. This is the pictures that we probably need new headshots. They're the same pictures for a long time, but it's about unlocking the keys to a better illness experience. And we realized that we had a lot of information about what patients and families faced near the end of life or in their final journey, and it was too late by the time that they met us. And we had lots of information that they needed earlier. So we really wanted to provide that in a way that would help patients and families. If you haven't heard about our podcast, you can go to our website, thewaitingroomrevolution.com. This is what it looks like. This is our fall colors. We've started our season 3 is now. They drop every Tuesday. And if you just scroll down a bit, we're really talking a lot about season 1, which is what we spent years sort of putting together. Some of our best tips are 7 keys to having a better experience. So you'll be able to listen to that. And we might talk a little bit about that in today's podcast. And I'll just put the infographic really quickly. Sammy, do you want to just spend a couple minutes just explaining some of the keys? We can go back and forth.
Sure. Keeping things short-winded is not my forte, but okay, I'm going to try. All right. So ta-da! These are our 7 keys or skills or mindsets that we uncovered when we listened to thousands and thousands of stories from people who had good stories and not good stories. And so this is the advice that we give people, patients, families, caregivers, formal caregivers, healthcare providers, anyone, to try to help the major pitfalls that we were seeing in people's journey through a progressive illness. Okay, so the first one is walk 2 roads. Oh, by the way, none of this is rocket science. You might be underwhelmed by it, but that's the beauty of it. It's so simple and it was right before our eyes, and anyone can do it. Okay, see, here I go. It's not short-winded. Number 1, walk 2 roads. This episode is about balancing hope while preparing at the same time. And I could go on and on about that, but that's what that one's about. Do you want me to do all of them, Hsien?
Sure. We can go back. I can do the second. We'll go back and forth.
Sure.
Yeah. The second one is called zoom out. This is the idea that oftentimes we zoom into the weeds of the illness, the day-to-day of the illness, and zooming out is a skill to look at the big picture of your illness, where you've come from, where you're at now, and what the future holds. And that sort of trajectory, the storyline of your illness, knowing that helps set the context for a lot of decisions that are coming up.
The third one is know your style. And this episode is really about taking stock of who you are and who are the people around you and what are their vibes? What's your natural way of coping with hurdles when they come your way in your life? How do you get through these, and what strategies can we exploit that you've already used your entire life to help you understand how you're probably going to walk this illness journey? And then we talk a little bit about matching your own style with someone else in your inner life so that together your various styles complement each other and hopefully prepare you for the best possible experience, even though we can't change the illness itself.
The fourth key, customize your order, is really just about the idea that you should declare what's important to you up front, and the standard of care is sort of the conveyor belt of medicine, and sometimes that's exactly what you need and want, but there are times to customize your order and tailor your care plan to your preferences, desires, goals.
And number 5 is about appreciating that the person who has the diagnosis is definitely the star of the journey, but there is a ripple effect on the people around them. And so this is a shout out to the fact that families and caregivers and friends and neighbors all have a parallel experience along with the person who has the illness.
The sixth skill is called Tag Youre It, and it's just the idea that people sort of hope there's a navigator in the system who will sort of, coordinate and navigate everything. But we've realized people who have a better experience, they have to play a central role in connecting the dots, whether it's the person with the illness or somebody in their family. But oftentimes, especially at transitions, somebody's got to connect the dots and put the pieces together to keep the storyline going.
And number 7 is about inviting yourself. Really what this is about is quiet, polite, nice, good patients often get just the standard of care, and they don't usually get the answers that they're probably wondering about and have lots of questions. So we encourage patients and families to speak up, and we arm them with lots of really important questions so that they can leach out of the system what they need. And so really we're inviting patients and families to move from the back seat of their journey into the front seat and help be more empowered or activated. There's an 8th episode as well, and that one's really about what the last year looks like in many illnesses. And then there's a final episode where we pull it all together, because this is not, step 1, step 2. They're not steps. They're mindsets and skills that are like a smorgasbord in the end. You listen to all of them and then just, become a new type of patient and caregiver as we go forward in our illness and face the formal healthcare system.
So fantastic. So I hope that we get it, we'll talk. So this is how we connected with Stanford Center for Palliative Care. Dr. Joshua Fronk reached out and the center and trying to focus on AYA. And so that's the event. So we're about to kick off. I'll do it right now. We're going to go live, and welcome to everyone. I've seen more people joining from the East Coast and the West Coast. So welcome. So welcome back to the Waiting Room Revolution. Today, we are very excited to be hosting a live event focused on AYA cancer, which is adolescents and young adults with cancer. We have Dr. Joshua Fronk, a palliative care physician from Stanford Center for Palliative Care, and Max Lee, an AYA cancer patient with us. We're very excited. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
I'm going to kick it off, if it's okay, with some back and forth questions, but maybe I'll just start with Max. Max, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your cancer journey so far?
Okay, so I'm Max, and Dr. Fronk is my palliative care physician, and I'm 20 years old, and I have osteosarcoma, and a bit about myself. I guess I was before I was diagnosed, I was just like a normal high school kid, and never expecting any of this to happen to me. And so I first got diagnosed in January of 2019, and I went through treatment, and for a brief period of time, or actually, it's a decent amount of time, like 9 months. I went into remission, and I was able to attend college, and I majored in aerospace engineering, which I always wanted to do since around the end of 11th grade. And from that point on, in 2020, sort of like good few months into the pandemic is when my disease recurred and it became incurable. And so I've sort of spent over a year now living with a serious disease.
Thank you, Max, for being on today and being willing to share your question, answer our questions, and being so open. Really appreciate it. So I'll ask the next question, and I know my co-host is going to come in. But Josh, so when you met Max, like, what were your impressions, and what do you, when you meet an AYA patient, like, how do you introduce what you do to them?
So I mean, two questions. I mean, I think there's still a lot of unknown around what palliative care, palliative medicine is. And so that uncertainty actually allows the opportunity to kind of establish what you want patients to know and what you want them to expect. And so actually, I mean, a lot of times what my approach is with patients is just being very real, being a human. I try to very quickly throw away the cloak of being a doctor. I tell patients it's okay to call me Josh, because this is a human experience. And I think sometimes that white coat and the doctor side of all of this almost puts a barrier between helping patients really facilitate having a great kind of to spend the rest of their time that they have and making sure that's well spent time. And so that's something I kind of try to do, especially with my young adult patients, just because it is scary. Like, this is like something that's not been anywhere in their mindset. They've never thought about really their own mortality in this type of level. And so just being able to make sure that there's a space that's free and open, that they can be vulnerable, I think is really important. I think with Max, his oncologist is actually the one that reached out to me. And I applaud her for being both a champion of palliative care and realizing that, you know, the work that I do and the work that we do in the palliative medicine realm is not about telling patients to stop treatment. It's not about, hey, it's time to give up. It's just time to talk about death and dying. Like, it's more than that. And so I really appreciate that she recognizes the important role that we can play in partnering together with her as she continues to provide treatment options for Max. And so when I met Max, I think the first thing I was very much kind of in awe with is just his maturity. And I don't think he really fully understands how mature he really is in many ways. I see patients who are on the other spectrum of life, near their 90s or 80s, and for them trying to approach end of life can be really challenging and almost live in a world of denial. And Max, from the get-go, has been very clear about, look, I understand what this is. I understand that life is short for me, but I want to maximize what time I have. I still want to be able to get treatments to prolong life as much as I can. And legacy is really important to me. So I really applaud him for his maturity in that, because I don't think everybody can come at that same level at the beginning.
Okay, Josh, plug your ears for a second. Come on, just do this. Okay, both sides.
All right, both sides.
Max, what do you like about Josh?
I think what he said is very accurate. That he comes across as not just a doctor, but someone you can absolutely talk to. And so I think he correctly identified his just right off the bat what really I found helpful, because he was super approachable about everything, and he makes that very clear. And so right from the start, I knew it was okay to share what I've been thinking about death and dying and stuff like that. Even though I came into this knowing that he's a palliative care doctor, so obviously he's familiar with all this stuff. But the amount of openness that I felt still surprised me, and so yeah, that's probably what I like most about you know about Josh, and like just like how he has been able to like help me.
We won't tell him what you said you don't like about him when his, we won't.
Yeah.
But so has it been hard for you to find people to speak openly about death and dying with you?
Not at all, because I really just need one person, which is my mom, and you guys know that she's watching right now. And so she's like, she's very supportive of me, like you know, throughout my whole life, and so it was very easy to just start, you know, sharing my thoughts with her, especially during the first stretch where I was first diagnosed. That would have been a lot tougher if I didn't have her to talk to, especially during those like difficult nights in the hospital doing chemotherapy. And you know, she was just always there, and I feel like for a lot of it, I didn't act the way I want to act. You know, I was very like down and just very like I don't know. It was just very hard to get through some of those, especially with this one chemotherapy treatment that I had, where it was based on whether you clear it, that you could discharge me from the hospital, like whether you can clear the chemotherapy from your system, and that sort of varies. And so waiting for that, you know, got really hard. And so when I was really struggling with that, my mom was there, and that sometimes it was like frustrating as well for both of us, because like she saw me like in, you know, like just really like I always told her like, man, I just really want to go home, which I really regret doing, because I know like, you know, it feels bad because she can't really do anything to help, you know. She wants to help, like, but then she can't, and so that was like really tough. And but for some weird reason, like I always still felt the need to just be like, man, I'm feeling terrible right now. And my mom would always be there to listen to me, and like, you know, just even when I was being very like complaining about stuff. And so like during those like darkest moments, like I feel like without my mom, I probably would have like just snapped or something. I don't know. I feel like she helped me a lot during those times.
I bet she appreciated your honesty though, Max, because it sounds like you're the kind of person when you're feeling down, you're going to tell her. And when you're feeling well, you're going to tell her that too. And so she can really trust you to tell it like it is, right?
Yeah. And it's just really tough, because I know like my mom's just been like very like just totally like completely like a great mom, and she's just completely like, you know, selfless, and just wants me to like be as comfortable as possible while I'm in the hospital. And so she knew like, you know, when my cancer recurred, like how much I really didn't like being there, how much it affected me. And so like, you know, for treatment decisions, she understood what I like valued. And so that was very important, because towards, you know, the serious end where it's like, you know, the cancer is incurable. Now I have to decide, you know, what symptoms are tolerable. My mom knew exactly, you know, what I could and couldn't handle. Yeah, so that's also another part where she helped me a lot.
Just thinking we should have had her. We can't invite her now. That's not fair, but she should have been part of our interview. But I think you're representing her well. So thank you, Matt.
And I just to add, just to give my own shout out to his mom, like I've been so impressed, you know, as I've had, you know, my own individual appointments with Max, and most of them because of the pandemic been by video. You know, his mom may often be in the background. She'll kind of wave and say hello, And I'll even offer like, well, do you want to be with us today? Do you want to participate? And she's like, no, this is Max's appointment.
I told her that. Yeah, it's my fault, but
no, but
that
I
happened.
think she values your opinion in that, right? Like there are other people where it is like, that is not like family members will overstep and say, no, I need to be there, and not really listen to the actual person who's going through this. And I applaud her, even if you're telling her, hey mom, I want this by myself, she listens to you, right? Like she's respecting your autonomy as an adult, even though you're her child. And that takes a lot. And I've always been very respectful and just appreciative of her for doing that.
There's a question is in the chat box about your mom, Max. It's a question about what support does your mom have available to her as she's also journeying through this illness with you? That's for both of you. Either of you can answer.
Yeah, I was always like super concerned, like, because my mom was like, oh no, I can handle this, I can bear this, like, and so like there's been a few times where we had the social worker during our meetings like ask my mom like, oh, you know, like whatever you need, like you know, just ask us. And then she like, and like when we're talking, like she just always says like, oh, it's perfectly fine. And she always mentions that, you know, how her work is like super lenient, like with like time off, like her boss just like is like, oh, it's okay, we totally understand, like you can you can take time off, because, you know, she also communicated my situation.
Mhm.
And so for her, like she feels like I don't know, I don't know what gives her like the strength, to be honest. Like um yeah, I wish you could ask her this right now. I always ask her this too, like, but I don't know, I just never understand, because I definitely don't see myself like being as like just able as my mom. I don't know.
We can do
I'm
a
sorry, I
follow-up with,
didn't really answer the question.
no, it's, no, you did.
Max's mom can also write in the chat if she wants to
Yeah.
offer the kinds of ways she gets supports. But I bet you that you are her inspiration, and that your bravery and willingness to face you know, this head on like you do and talk so openly probably gives your mom her marching orders. Like, Max, okay, if you can keep your chin up, I'm going to keep my chin up too. You're
Yeah.
feeding off of each other.
Yeah. Well, but we will, I mean, I will say that in our podcast, we do talk to a lot of family members and parents, and, you know, they have their own needs too. That's expect the ripple effects. And you could also, you know, ask, have your own appointments with Dr. Fronk, or if you needed to, you know, sort of ask your own questions on your own. But I was wondering, Josh, what is different? Like, how are the needs of AYA patients different than many of the patients that you see?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to just kind of recognize is that group, it kind of encompasses a pretty large range of ages. We're talking about patients from the age of 14, people from 14 all the way to 39. So it's a pretty large group. And with that, it also, I think, kind of brings some challenges, because a lot of those who may be diagnosed early on are often cared for in like a children's hospital setting, which often have a whole bunch of robust ancillary services, other things that are available that we don't have in the adult world. And then even sometimes as patients are kind of handed off to the adult side, or if they're diagnosed and they always on the adult side, those resources aren't to the same level often as you see in the children's world and the children's hospital side. I think the hard thing, or one of the hard things with this group of people, is we don't expect this group to be really sick. It's one thing when a patient comes to your clinic or comes to the hospital and they're in their 70s and they have a stage 4 cancer, or they have advanced heart disease. For those doctors, those medical staff who are taking care for those people, even for family members, there's kind of like in the back of the head, like, oh, this is expected, right? Life expectancy is less than 100 years. So we're kind of getting close to the end. So this makes sense. For this age group, it is a mind screw. Like we don't anticipate talking or thinking about this age of this realm of patients, or these realms of people, of actually maybe facing end of life. And so there's a lot of our own emotions that come from that. And there's a lot of different challenges that this range of people bring, right? So we're not just dealing with life review, but we're dealing with a lot of proactive grief. I'm not gonna be able to have kids. I'm not gonna get married. I'm not gonna be able to have my job. I'm not gonna be able to travel the world. So there's a lot of like that proactive stuff that actually is much more heavy in my experience than the respective or the retrospective, looking back on my life, thinking about the things I could have done or should have done, or things I did do. It's that proactive stuff, that regret that I won't be able to actually participate in those things. That's really, really hard.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So many patients are looking back and trying to sort out where they've been, where they've come from, what their story's been. But it's true. This is the grieving a story of going forward, or not being able to go as forward as you would have liked. Yeah. Yeah. To think
Max, is
about-
there anything that you feel like that you want others to know that are the unique needs of AYA patients, or any of your healthcare providers that you wish they were more aware of?
I think the impact of how like just how derailing it is, like for me that was like the most like frustrating part, because I feel like it's like, maybe this is kind of reductive, but it's like I was just in the middle of, this or that. Like I was in the middle of, my senior year in high school, like, and I was in the middle of, figuring out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and also I was in the middle of a robotics competition season. Just all these things where it's just like it feels very, very small, like things to complain about, right? But like it just feels terrible, like when you're in that like sort of hectic period of time. Like I feel like from, I think as early as like middle school for some people, like to like college, and like I think it's just there's um, a lot of like feeling like the flow of time has just stopped, and like it's something that is very difficult to like deal with, like sort of I guess mentally, just waking up in the morning and like sort of being like, oh, like 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 having all these things to think about, like the treatment and the like whatever surgery. Like for me it was an amputation, and whatever it showed on the scans, whatever like treatments were being recommended, and that suddenly like wedges its way in, and I think the most like stressful time for me was actually when I was diagnosed with cancer for the first time, like not when it was like terminal, because it felt like I still needed to move forward. I still needed to like do what I can, finish high school at the very least, try and like get things, keep living with this, and then hopefully it'll go away. Hopefully I just need to bear like this and that, like the chemotherapy plan, and then the surgery or whatever, the standard treatment, and then it'll be gone, and then I can go back full force in my life, like like so I was still trying to juggle everything, like sort of like walking two roads, where it's like remaining very hopeful, because at that point I think there was overwhelming hope. At that point it was like standard treatment, like there's a good shot you'll make it, was like the sort of vibe that I got, and so that propelled me, and in a way it both like helped and hurt me, because it made me that much more stressed about like okay, this is like a challenge that now I have to face. Before like I didn't have like before I didn't have like anything like this, but now that like this is something I wasn't expecting, but I still have to like continue on like thinking that I'm going to make it, right? And so it just becomes like, I guess like another extracurricular activity, except this extracurricular activity is not something that, you know, you signed up for, not something you expected to do, not something that you'll really enjoy at all. But it's something that, you know, it's like, it's pretty much just do or die. So there's no real option. That's like, that for me was like the period of my time where I felt like I just needed to like calm down, you know, but I'm not sure like there could be much convincing for someone who's like at that point, because it is very frustrating and it is like, no, I don't want to calm down. I want to do my best, you know. So yeah, I think that is the major challenge. I'm not sure I have good solutions for it, because I don't think I could convince myself back then to just be like, no, you don't need to try that hard. Like, you know, like you can just take a gap year if you want. You can, but I didn't want to. I just didn't want to, and then you know, I put myself through a whole lot more stress than I needed to be in during that time.
Max, you mentioned the podcast episode Walk Two Roads, where you're hoping for the best and planning at the same time. So you're in a different situation now than you were when you were first diagnosed. Would you say that you still have hope?
I think it is like, it is sort of hope in the sense that it's something that I'm trying to look to the future and you know, sort of feel like there's still something, there's still some meaning to it all.
Yeah.
But it's more ambiguous. Whereas I guess previously it was more like very clear cut. It was just my original goals, but you know, with an extra challenge. And sort of this hope is something that I had to build on my own, like completely, and I didn't know how to build it, and I didn't want to build it because I still missed my old dream. So like it was very, very tough to sort of reorient myself and think like, you know, just accept the reality that my life is not going to be long. And that's really like the key thing, the key step that was necessary for me to like at least have some hope about, you know, where this is all going. Because if I can't even, if I say, oh, this is unacceptable, then how can you, like, it's very difficult to say like what's most likely going to happen is unacceptable, right? Because that's something that you have to be prepared to accept. And so once I was prepared to accept the likelihood of that happening, like there were still things that I wanted to do, except now it's very, very different. Now I can't look like, you know, too strongly at, you know, like just like letting loose like a career path or anything like that. Like now it was more like I have a limited amount of time, and now I have to like sort of reprioritize like the things that I like really want to express, and the things that I really want to keep doing. And so a lot of the things from my old goal were missing from that. Like I think just giving up, like, or like not really giving up, but sort of like accepting that I'll be taking a break from this whole like college nonsense and like or not nonsense, but like I was really torturing myself with like, you know, the thought of just having to keep moving despite my cancer, like just like boxing that away and then focusing on like what remains of my time here, and then like thinking about what I want to do, I guess.
Yeah. You know, what I'm hearing is that it's been really important for you to be grounded in the reality of where you're at in your situation. You had a certain kind of hope when you were first diagnosed, like the first time around, you were hoping that it would all go away and that you would just pick up where you left off in your life that once was, right?
Yeah.
And that in order for you to continue to have hope, it's important for you to just be really realistic about that hope, not think too far ahead or think unrealistically, that there's a reality part to your hope. And we've heard that from other people as well. And you really just described that so eloquently. So thank you.
I just wanted just to tag onto that just a little bit, just because I think Max, he articulated it so well, and I think this is something that I see in all my patients, but especially with this group, is there's a grieving process that has to be had around the loss of your own self. One of the nurse practitioners I've worked with or had privilege of working with for many years, she often she knows this is one of my my techniques of talking with people, but just, you know, accepting the loss of who you were, and having to reorganize how you see yourself in this new state of a disease, this new state of a short life. And there's still hope to be had, right? Like I think Max does it very well. There are still good things. There are things that you can still hope for, but it needs to be reorganized. And that process can be really hard for a lot of people. It can be really challenging to kind of grieve the loss of not being able to finish college, or grieve the loss of not being able to have a child, or whatever it may be. Those life experiences can be really hard for people to kind of let go.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you both, well, what you thought about our podcast, and if you found any of the keys helpful in how you thought about things. So maybe I'll ask Josh first. I mean, it's self-serving, but have there been any keys from our podcast that have been helpful? Maybe that's a fair question.
No, I think the way you have outlined out kind of the process, and like Sam says, it's not like a step, right? It's not like you go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, but just kind of articulating what this journey may look like for you. And I think there are some things that are going to be harder for some people. And there's going to be some things that are easier for people to kind of accept and own. And it could be, you know, just as like walking that journey of holding on to hope, and yet also planning for in case the hope doesn't happen. Those are some truths for all of us, regardless of where we're at in our life journey. So I actually think that there's a lot there that could be worthwhile for people to really kind of incorporate.
Max, how about you?
For me, I think the thing that most resonated with me was being able to like zoom out, and it was more like a balance between like trying to zoom out and like zoom in almost. Like what I mean by that is like, you know, just trying to like disease wise, instead of like you know, not caring about like what happens like further down the line, you know, trying to sort of like be prepared for you know, all the steps in like the disease's like, you know, natural history sort of, and being ready for that, and like also zooming in from like all the things that I wanted to happen, or I wanted to like experience, that might not be possible, and so just like reframing how I'm thinking about the future, because you know, during those times, it's like sometimes I'm like drifting too far out almost, or drifting too far in. Yeah.
Max, has it been important, and you know you don't have to answer any question we ask, but has it been important for you to ask really humongous questions like things around a timeline?
I think for me, it was like not very necessary at the beginning, because of how helpful, like, you know, the Stanford people were. Like they had like the map of like, you know, the treatment and everything, and you know, my doctors have always been like, you know, very clear about like timeline stuff.
Mhm.
I think when it became more important was towards uh, was during my um, diagnosis when it came back, and at that time I had to sort of like, you know, ask myself like, uh, uh, well, is this going to be curable or not? You know, what are the chances that I'll survive more than like 2 years? To try and get some more specifics. And then sort of after that, I think my oncologist knew, like, you know, like I'm interested in talking about, you know, not just like what treatments there are next, like radiation, immunotherapy, like those options. Like that's what I was initially presented with. Um, and so when I asked about prognosis, that sort of like at least made her realize, like, you know, I want to know what's going to happen in the future. And so um, I think while it didn't really lead to any results in the near term, um, because I think, I think she just still wasn't like entirely comfortable with like, you know, discussing the full timeline. But I think she sort of heard what I was saying, and then passed it on to like my original oncologist. And I'm sorry for not making this clear earlier, but the oncologist who gave me my terminal diagnosis was a different one. She was subbing in for my current oncologist, who's been there with most of my journey, because she was on like maternity leave. So like after she came back, she sort of told me like, oh, like, you know, my substitute like told me like what you told her. So I was like, oh, like I was very like pleasantly surprised that, you know, they had communicated that about like the things I was thinking about towards like death and dying, and so that helped my current oncologist to sort of understand like how I was sort of dealing with my terminal diagnosis. And so I think that also sort of led to the chain of events that had her contact Josh and then say that, you know, like, would you be interested in, you know, palliative care? And so I think making that it clear, like from the moment of my diagnosis, like I want to be informed, like sort of like, you know, if I'm not going to make it, I want to know like what's coming for me at the end. I think that just asking like about prognosis first, and then like depending on when is appropriate, like, you know, asking about like stuff that might happen like very far down the line, like hypothetically, like, you know, if this immunotherapy, this you know, targeted therapy or whatever, like ends up not working, like what's going to happen. And so I asked that a lot, and I think eventually it did help, but it did take some time.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think, Max, he does a very good job. I don't think he recognizes that he actually highlights a lot of the different keys that you guys talk about, right, in your podcast. The idea of just recognizing your own personal approach to your healthcare. For Max, he wants to be direct. He wants questions asked and answered. Not everyone's like that, right? Some people don't want to know everything. Some people just want to know big picture, or some people don't want to know anything. And they tell you to tell, who their surrogate is, and everything goes to that direction. But then Max being able to take control about what's important to him, and, he himself inviting himself to ask those hard questions and talk about those hard things. Like, those are all pieces that are part of the journey that you all highlight very well. That's part of this process.
Mm-hmm. There's a really good question in the chat. Josh, Deborah is curious, what has and hasn't been helpful for healthcare providers to say or do in your journey? Okay, I think this is to Max or Josh, both. So you can both answer. So what do you find is helpful or not helpful? Like, if you had to give other healthcare providers advice, okay, don't say this and make sure you don't do this, or this is really great. What advice would you give any healthcare providers?
Do you want me to go first, or want Max to go first?
Either one of you.
Yeah. I guess I just have one thing to say, I guess. I think it's actually very helpful for providers to be, I guess, very willing to talk about their own past experiences. Because right off the bat, I know whoever I'm seeing is going to want to know my history and stuff like that. But also because this is an area where I want to also understand my healthcare provider, I also want to know what experiences have they had, especially with cases that may not be good to hear about, that Josh or not pleasant to hear about, but it's very important to know what has happened in the past in similar situations, and the possibilities. I guess some examples I sort of almost drawing a blank, but I think there was one patient that Josh had that wasn't exactly clear. It wasn't clear for the whole time what they wanted, what they wanted towards the end of their life. And so it turned out that something as small as just being in the backyard or being in the garden was able to change their mindset a lot. And so that was also very affirming. It's just talking about how diffusing examples into discussions about because the original discussion I think we were having was about how I was unsure what I would be able to tolerate, and at what point I would want basically a do not resuscitate, or do not give treatment past this point. And so while we were having those kinds of discussions, having examples of people that were in my situation, I think was actually very helpful. And so, yeah, I think I'm not really sure what healthcare providers are considering maybe to tell or not to tell their patients, but I think examples are very positive to at least some people like me. So I guess being open to that is a good idea.
I would just say that that's our example of invite yourself. As a patient, you can invite yourself to the conversation, but as a provider, you can invite the patient to know that, would it be helpful to know that would it be helpful to hear this? Would it be helpful to talk about this? Will that? And follow their lead. Max clearly is someone who found the examples helpful, but they don't know what you know. So I think it's clear that you're able to articulate what you're looking for, and the relationship is there, and so they're following your lead. And I think that's seems to have made a difference in your experience so far. But Josh, I think the question is actually asked to you about what advice you have to say and do or not do.
And I'm going to answer this as if this person is a healthcare worker, or if other people are listening are healthcare workers. I would say the thing that I would challenge everybody to really really make the biggest difference in this journey, helping with anybody who's living with serious illness or life-limiting illness, is working on reframing your mind around what your purpose is in healthcare. Where I find people burning themselves out emotionally is because we have built in our heads this idea that my job as a physician, or my job as a nurse, or whatever your role in medicine is to cure the disease, is to help the person not die. And the truth is, right, for all of us, none of us escape this mortal journey without having an end. That's the truth for all of us. And sometimes it happens sooner than later. And you can make a huge amount of difference, some amazing impacts for people, allowing them to live life to their fullest, whatever that life spectrum is, and reframing your own mind so you don't feel this sense of failure, right? Because you can actually look at it in the way of like, actually, I gave this person more time. They were able to achieve this goal. And that reframe, I think, is really the biggest thing that can help healthcare workers.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. Who wants to know my pet peeve? Anyone? Max, do you want to know? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't stand it when healthcare providers say, sorry, I don't have a crystal ball. Is that not the worst? I get where it's coming from. Did anyone ever say that to you, Max?
Not the exact phrase, but I mean, it's like super understandable, like, because it's sort of conveying that, like, because what I was asking for is like something very specific, and I kind of knew I wouldn't get the answers, like, because there's just not enough, like, I guess not enough like data, not enough people like at this with this particular, like, my situation,
You're so
but
nice, Max.
but also I think I remember this from the podcast, like, there is still like a natural history, like a general trend, and that has also never been mentioned. So I think maybe what you sort of like are getting at is like, or part of it is like it's like a way to divert attention from potential information that could have been helpful.
Yeah.
And so I understand, but I feel like it's just because, like, both my oncologists have, like, sort of shared that, like, sentiment. It's like, we don't have like the exact answer, something like that, saying something like that. And I just feel like I think I don't know what
No, I
I'm
think
sort of crashing right now.
I know you're saying it was appropriate for them to respond that way for the types of questions you were asking.
Yeah, but I do also understand, like, if they answered that way, like every time that I asked them a question, or like a question about, like, where this was heading, then I would be very frustrated. But I think it wasn't very long at all before they were able to open up about this. About, like, exactly what they thought of, like, my prognosis and stuff. So I guess it's like it's a hurdle that doesn't really help some patients. Yeah, sorry.
No, can I ask you something about what you mentioned earlier about legacy leaving? Can we ask you more about that?
Yeah.
So, or maybe it was Josh that mentioned that you were focusing on legacy leaving. I can't remember which one of you said it, but can you share what that means to you and the types of things that you're involved in?
I think it's more about like leaving in like like just being able to express myself, like not necessarily like um, for the sake of like leaving like any legacy possible. It's just more like trying to stay true to myself, and being able to express what I want to express. And an example of this is uh, I was recently advocating for more research and more focus towards brain preservation for the Brain Preservation Foundation.
Mhm.
And what they're trying to do is sort of like science advocacy for like the future, and just basically pushing neuroscientists to talk more about brain preservation and like stuff that could help terminal patients. And I think for me, that was something that like I really was personally interested in, and
Mhm.
so I felt like just so moved by their founder, who was who I saw like talking about this, uh, and so I wrote him an email like saying like this is something that I also would have really liked to see, and I want to help you like challenge other neuroscientists to like say um, is it possible for terminal patients to have this?
Mhm.
And he actually responded and asked me to like become an advocate. And so I was really glad to sort of work with him and like other people that were involved in the foundation.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, um, to be honest, I was kind of disappointed because I felt, just very helpless, and I felt like I couldn't really help um, the discussion, just being a terminal patient and offering my perspective. Um, but I think I was very encouraged because he said like, he was sort of also like ready to give up before he received like my email, like give up pushing for this as strongly. And so like seeing my email really helped him like, um, keep moving.
Mhm.
And also just having like said what I said, I felt like really helped me because I felt like I needed to share my perspective on the situation, and I did
Mhm.
accomplish that, even though it didn't
Mhm.
really move like it didn't really move anyone to like take action. But that
Yeah.
wasn't my
Yeah.
original expectation.
Mhm.
Yet it did feel better. I did feel better after I said those things
Yeah.
about like like for in a video, just like you know because it seems like it's so difficult to approach something like this, um, especially if you don't know anything about brain preservation. You don't know anything about what's possible, but you see these people uh, that are just really trying to get engagement from the scientific community, um, and so I feel like how could I not um, help them, or at least try to help them, I guess,
Yeah.
even
Well,
in the end if it didn't work out.
it says a lot about you as a person, right? That you've moved beyond, I think some people call that transcendence. You move beyond your own needs and you're thinking about other people, the world around you, the future of humankind, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you're very special. Good job, Mom. Good job, Max's mom. Again, anyway.
Um, Josh, I have a question for you. This is the AYE community, or this age range is very large. I mean, we were looking for groups to sort of connect with, and it seems like it's a sort of a very diverse community. And I guess I'm wondering your thoughts around some of the challenges around engagement, community building, advocacy. for this diverse group? Because I mean, even, you know, ASCO, the American Society for Clinical Oncology, I thought they would have a working group or a subgroup, but it didn't seem to be. Maybe I just didn't find it. But has it been challenging? Like, why do you think that there aren't more people corralling around this group that, you know, clearly are very articulate and have, you know, important needs that are not necessarily being addressed?
For me, it's like lack of Oh, sorry.
No, go
Wait,
for it.
wait,
You're in
oh wait,
charge.
no, were you asking Josh or were you asking? Oh,
You know
sorry,
what? It's a great. No, it's okay. You know, it's a
for
great
you,
question
Max.
for
Go
both.
for it.
Yeah, go first, Max.
Sorry. Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
No, it's perfect.
I want to hear
I-
both of your
I
opinions.
think it's
To be
just
honest,
because like for me it's like really lack of confidence and also like lack of like knowing that many perspectives, because I feel like I'm like just me, and like I feel like everyone has their own like way of dealing with this, and I can't speak for you know, everyone in my age group, especially the AYA age group, which, you know, goes up like way older than me, and then like I feel like maybe like even if it was like just teenagers, like that age range, I still couldn't like speak for, you know, those people. Yeah. So
Mhm.
I feel like it's just very difficult to uh, have like one sort of community based on just that the one struggle that we all deal with. There's still like a tremendous like diversity.
Mhm.
And Josh, what are your thoughts?
I think this is an area that I think people are starting to recognize this is an important group of patients that are unique, right? I think for the longest time, we kind of have always, you're under 18, so you're pediatric, you're over 18, you're an adult. And actually, this group of people actually have very unique challenges. You know, if you look at just kind of the overall mortality of cancer care for this group, even though it's been decreasing for a lot of cancer types, there are still some cancer types where it hasn't changed, right? And unfortunately, that is bone cancer. Sarcoma is one of those, right? Where we're not seeing a lot of the improvements we're seeing with other types of cancer types in other age groups. I think there's also not a lot of research being done, like what is the impact of living with cancer if you are a survivor? How does that impact your life, right? What is the morbidity effects of that? And I think we really haven't looked at that fully either. So I do think that it's starting to become much more of part of the dialogue, which is obviously the first step towards change.
Mhm.
But I definitely feel like we have, you know, some ways to go as far as really looking at this group of patients specifically and how best to care for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Max, what's most important to you now? Like, what are the most important things? I know your mom is, and I know Josh, but what's important to you in this chapter?
I think I'm having trouble with that, but I do have certain things that I know are important, like spending time with my family and, you know, preparing to say goodbye, you know, to my family and to my friends. And that's like sort of a problem I face. And I guess problems are important things, right? So,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And then besides that, also my own mortality, and also just trying to find things to do that I feel like would be meaningful.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I guess that sort of ties back into like the legacy thing. Uh, yeah, I guess those are the main areas.
Mhm. How?
Max, I
Yeah.
was just gonna say, Max highlighted a couple of things I think is really important for this specific group is the impacts, not just that as the families are going through this, but friends, right? I feel like this group, even more so than others, your social circle doesn't know how to respond
Yeah.
to a person who may be facing end of life. And so, you know, we think about social media and all these really positive things that can be helpful. I've had a fair number of patients in this group tell me they hate social media, right? Social media actually ends up becoming really hard because you see your friends move on with their life, get the job, get the kid, go on, and kind of it becomes this ongoing kind of battle of like your reality versus what their reality is. And even though those friendships may continue, when you get together, it's like the friends who aren't going through it don't know quite to say, right? What do you say? If you become a widower of someone who's died from cancer in this age group, you don't have support groups, right? The same widower groups that you would go to when you're 80s or 90s, you don't really fit in. And so I think this group is really unique because those social struggles are very specific and different than others.
Well, yeah, I think that's very true. But my friends, I think, have been they're just very like mature. They responded like very well. I mean, like, they just, I feel like they know what to say, but like it's just me that always feels anxious. When they come to visit, like, but that's really just like the first couple of moments. And so like just getting over that awkwardness. For me, it's a big deal because I'm just like the anxious type of person. But my friends are like more, I think in general, they're more extroverted than I am. So
Well,
I think that helps.
I mean, in many ways, it's like you need to come out to your friends that you're facing end of life, right? And I can recall one of my very first patients I ever had in my role as a palliative medicine physician who really kind of opened my mind that this group of patients are unique and different is he never told his friends anything about his disease until he was basically months away from end of life. And when he finally did, it was heartbreaking because he actually had texted me saying, I should have done this months ago. Like, my friends are awesome. Like, right. And I feel like Max is right. Like, once you kind of overcome that initial hurdle that sometimes is our own internal fears, our friends and families can surprise us. Like, they kind of support and say, oh, all right, let's move on. Like, we'll be good.
Well, that's like, I feel like that mirrors my situation because I always waited until like people were like, hey, like, how are you doing? And just like, oh, like sometimes I had to like, turn off my phone and just be like, crap, like, and like it's always very like upsetting, because they always like they're just very concerned, and I don't know what I would do in that situation. It's like it's very heavy stuff, and I don't want to bring it on to other people. So the only people who know about it are people who like asked how I was doing, and so like it's just difficult to like talk about, I guess, but I think it's worth it. It's worth it to like maybe if approaching first is not like your style, then you can wait and just like keep it to yourself, and then but don't wait for until like you're gonna you're like months away from like the disease like getting really bad. But in my case, people who talk to me more often like were immediately aware, and I also told them, like, don't tell this person. I want to tell them myself. That was really just a way to avoid like telling them at all. Because I also don't know, like, for friends that were just like not as close, I don't want to burden them with this. And so like it's very difficult to decide when and who you're going to tell like your situation to.
I don't know if I should say this, but I'll say it anyways. But the one thing that I will say, I'll just share a story for myself, is when my uncle had pancreatic cancer and he passed away. He was an innovation professor, and so he wanted to innovate death or whatever. But he lived for several years. But he had like a living eulogy. He had like a living memorial celebration, which was his way of acknowledging his mortality, but being able to say goodbye and saying what he wanted to say, but allowing people to also say what they wanted to say, which kind of is like the coolest gift, because sometimes you miss out on the opportunity to say what you really want to say, or to let people know how meaningful or how important they were in your life at any age, frankly. We often miss those chances because we think we'll have another time. But after that happened, and we all did the thing, like every day after that was a bonus day, because he's like, I've already said everything, everyone knows. And it's at the end, it was like a whole event of focused on love, I guess, and peace. And so anyway, it was sort of every day was a bonus day where he just he said like at the end of it, a weight had lifted from him, and he was ready for the future. And he actually lived for several months later and did all kinds of things. But yeah, we had that moment where, and it wasn't sort of like you said, heavy and sad. It was an acknowledgement of all the meaning and how the life, what he had accomplished in the time that he had. So
it's interesting as you say that, because I often in my mind, I always kind of, the metaphor I picture is this, like the wall that we all in this mortal journey, we have to process at some point, right? Like, I am a mortal person. I'm going to face my end. Luckily, I can live in ignorance right now, but there will come a point in time when I have to really, truly face what it means to maybe be gone. And there's work to be had. There's work. And you can either kind of pile that work in the closet and close the door and leave it for another day. Eventually it's going to fall over. Like that work has to be, you have to process it. You have to say the goodbyes. You have to go through the legacy building. You have to do all these things. Or exactly like you really highlighted really well, you can address it, right? You can focus. It doesn't mean it's easier every day. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be some hard days or hard moments or hard emotions, but it's manageable, right? You can contain this process in a much more manageable way than letting it pile up and then eventually just fall over on top of you.
Closure. You can have closure, and there's still steps after, but you can, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I might as well say this. It's like pretty relevant. I'm actually, like my friends gave me this idea, but I'm actually like sort of like preparing to write some stuff like as like a final message, but like because some of my friends send me like letters, and they know it's because like sometimes like I can like in person it's like very difficult to talk about like these things, and so like the letters I felt like were a good idea, and also I feel like for me personally it would be kind of uncomfortable to have said stuff I want to say like about everyone, and then it's like, oh well, I'm still here, like so I think maybe because they send letters to me, so then I feel like very appropriate to send them some stuff like at the end, so I can have like the last word. I feel like that's very like just my preference, but
Sneaky.
yeah. But I feel like that's like a good way for me to get closure. Yeah.
And that's about knowing your style too, right? Because Hsien's uncle might have been this really, big personality, right? Hsien, you've told me about him before, like he was all about that, right? And Max is a more modest. Are you more introverted a little bit, Max?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. So your style would be to write letters and to leave them for people and let them absorb them and not have all the big bells and whistles around it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely easier than just I mean I tried the like other ways, like like I remember like because one of my friends was like, oh, like we should call sometime, so then I tried that, but I think I just end up getting way too like, I don't know, like if I talk for too long, I just sort of burn out and like, and just like lose my focus, I guess. And so I feel like I want to have thought things through when I say things to people for the last time.
Mhm.
And I can't really do that when I'm talking with someone like in person or like live. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
Mhm.
just that's just like very like me like
Mhm.
problem.
No, it's not a problem. It's your style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's your style. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of which, we're sort of coming a little bit to the end of our time. So I'd love to leave the
Oh.
last word to well, both of you. I don't know, maybe Sammy has one. Do you have a burning question?
No,
Okay.
I could talk forever and listen to Max and Josh.
I know.
So
I
many
it has been amazing. I sort of want to leave the last word. Is there anything that we didn't ask that you wanted to talk about or wanted to say, either about advice for other people or something that you wanted to let others know on the call and out who might listen in the future? Yeah, go ahead.
This is going to be part of your legacy because this is going to be concretized. It is this event, but also it's going to live on because it's being recorded. So you can let it rip. You can say whatever you want or not. For someone who doesn't like being put on the spot. And you know,
No,
I
really appreciate like, this opportunity, and thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah, and this is definitely something like that I feel like I don't know, I felt like when Josh like sort of told me like, hey, like this opportunity came up and like I was considering you. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good thing. Like why wouldn't I want to do that? Like, it's like something that like I just I feel like for me especially like I can't really talk about these things without like much difficulty, and so like stuff like the podcast, like that is really helpful, where I just listen to it on my own time, and so I know how helpful like like this format is, like I guess indirect format, and so yeah, to be able to contribute to this in any way is like it makes me happy. Yeah.
You've done an incredible job this evening. We want to know if Josh has some last words.
I mean, no, not to steal anything from Max. I think for me, just anybody, you're not alone. Like, I mean, anybody who's going through this, there are people who are wanting and willing to help you, whether you're on the oncology side, you're like, I don't know what to do. There are people who are willing to help you. And if you're on the patient side, there are definitely resources out there. It may take a little bit of kind of research, but there are definitely people that want to help you through this.
What I'm hearing, a common thread is inviting everyone to be real and to be open and honest and just speak what's on their mind is very helpful, as opposed to putting up walls and putting our head in the sand and avoiding difficult conversations. There's something about just being real and being human that allows this experience to go more smoothly than not. So, there's a lot of people thanking you in the chat right now, thanking Max's mom, thanking both of you. Really, you've a lot of things have been said tonight that I'm going to think more about. And I love that about doing these interviews. Just when you think you know it all, I don't. And there's lots more for me to think about. And yeah, very generous of both of you to share this time with us. So really appreciate it.
But thanks for having us. Thanks for having Max. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Max,
Hsien?
I was just going to say, Max, it was an honor to meet you and know you, and thank you for sharing your time tonight. And same, Josh, as well. It was fun, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being part of our revolution.
You bet.
Okay. Good
Bye,
night,
everyone.
everyone.